Hi, I'm calling. I'm right on the corner of Main Street by Moonflower, and we're driving by, and I'd like to report a domestic dispute. Florida with the white van, Florida license plate, white van, gentleman,
Where's it at?
5'6" beard. They just drove off. They're going down Main Street. They made a right onto Main Street from Moonflower.
Or what were they doing?
Cooperative, but we drove by, and the gentleman was slapping the girl.
He was slapping her?
Yes, and then we stopped. They ran up and down the sidewalk. He proceeded to hit her, hopped in the car, and they drove off.
It is crime time here on Closing Arguments. Let's bring in tonight's guest. Joining me, former gang homicide detective Donald Schweitzer. Donald was a police officer for 10 years. He has investigated gang homicides as a detective, served as a member of the SWAT unit, and worked various narcotics assignments. On the way in, we heard that 911 call that was made to the police out in Moab, Utah, where the caller described seeing him striking her. Brian slapping Gabby. Brian hitting Gabby. But what I want to show you right now is a witness report from one of the responding officers who says that at approximately 4:30, I arrived at Moonflower, which is the co-op, the coffee shop. While standing on the south side of the street, I observed a man and a woman appeared to have some sort of a dispute. This, again, is the witness statement. Not the witness who called 911, though. They were talking aggressively at each other, and something seemed off. At one point, they were sort of fighting over a phone. I think the male took the female's phone. It appeared that he didn't want her in the white van. He got into the driver's side, and she followed him. At one point, she was punching him in the arm and or face and trying to get in the van. She essentially climbed in over him, over the passenger seat. I heard her say, "Why do you have to be so mean?" I wasn't sure how serious this was. It was hard to tell if they were sort of play fighting, but from my point of view, something definitely didn't seem right. It was as if the guy was trying to leave her and maybe take her phone. Not sure, but wanted to help out. I noticed another person had called this in, and as I left the store, I noticed the police officer and gave him my contact info. Okay, so let me ask you, Donald Schweitzer, as an officer, 911 caller is saying he's hitting her, and then they speak to this witness saying something else, and they continue their investigation. How do you figure out who the aggressor is?
This case really shows the challenge that police officers have when they're responding to reports of domestic disputes or domestic violence. In many cases, and I would say probably in most, you could probably conclude who is the primary aggressor, who is the person that really committed the abuse or the violence. But there are cases where you can't. What you've got to do is take your time. These investigations are hard because officers respond on the scene and they're asked to make some pretty quick decisions as to who is at fault. And quite frankly, sometimes they get it wrong because they just don't have enough information. In this case here, those witnesses are very, very important, and they should have been interviewed. I think that these people should have been separated, maybe brought to the station, and then taken their time to interview people and try to piece it together.
Now, another part of this investigation was they spoke with both Gabby and to Brian and spoke to them separately. But there were also some parts of this conversation that were struck me as a little unorthodox, and I'd like to get your take on it. Let's take a listen.
Try to meditate stuff, but you tend to have a lot of anxiety and stress.
I have a lot of anxiety.
And what's his name? Is it Brian? Is he usually pretty patient with you?
Yeah.
Thank you. Way of taking my anxiety and bringing it down, but my ex-wife, I'm just sharing, I know it's a little personal, but to help you understand, we would feed off each other's anxiety and it would spiral, you know what I mean? And it doesn't matter how much I loved her. It may be bad for your soul, just saying. And I'm not telling you what to do with your life, but if you know you have anxiety, look at the situations you can get in, you know what I mean? And we're not here to be mean to you or anything. Well, there's a first time and then it usually...
My wife has really, really bad anxiety, and she takes medication for it daily, and sometimes it's just not enough. Sometimes it builds up and it happens. I mean...
I think you definitely the doctor told me that anxiety, but I described
That's why it's part of my anxiety. Definitely the 5 months of traveling together, there's been like green, but we're also like right on top of each other.
I used to drive a truck.
What's that?
I used to be a commercial motor vehicle driver, you know, the big trucks.
Oh
And I took my wife with me, and we would easily spend a couple months on end without going home or anything like that, being cooped up in a little 8x8 cage is what I called it, because you didn't have any time to yourself, so to speak. You didn't have time to, you know, you're going through Arizona, you can't just turn off the road and go see the Grand Canyon or anything like that. Tyson?
Yep.
Officer Robbins, Phil called for me.
He did, yes.
This is Brian Laundrie.
Alrighty.
So he's going to get you all set up with your hotel room, and he's going to take care of it from here.
Alright. Well,
Alrighty?
thank you so much.
And like I said, just remember my requests. I think it'll make a big difference in your guys' next couple weeks at the very least.
I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for everything.
No problem. It's nice to meet you, Brian.
Nice to meet you.
Have a good one.
All right, so we know that they ended up getting separated for that night. Brian gets the hotel. She ends up staying in the van. A lot of people are talking about that she's the one that's crying and he's the one that's very calm, and we know how this whole story ends. Your thoughts about the way it was handled there at the end and the conversations, et cetera?
You know, police officers want to help people, and sometimes they do things that they probably shouldn't, like talk about their personal lives. I think that the officer was genuinely trying to show some empathy. He was trying to give some personal advice. He saw a dysfunctional relationship. He probably thought that she was the victim, even though there might not have been probable cause of arrest, but he was showing empathy. And so he started talking about that. I don't think it impacted an investigation here, but it certainly didn't help. That is it didn't add to anything by expressing his feelings or his personal stories for her. I think he was just trying to be a human and try to help her.